Hey everyone, it's Jeff. As we continue along on our podcast, Laura and I would love to touch on some topics that are near and dear to your hearts. So if you have anything that you want to hear us talk about, if you want to get Laura's unique perspective on some of the things that you might be dealing with or some things that your loved ones might be dealing with, we would love to hear about those things. Please send us an email. mail.sowhatwhocares@gmail.com is the best way to do that. Or you can send us something on social media through our DMs or a comment or something like that. But we'd love to hear from you. It's important to us to make sure that we are touching on the things that are important to you. Please, again, reach out to us. And while you're there, subscribe, like, and comment. Okay, enjoy the episode. The traveler rested the oar against the side of the boat and let the small breeze play across his face. It was nothing, just a gentle stirring of air, but it felt like an invitation. He noticed how it moved through the world, never captured, never contained. It danced across the surface of the water. It tugged at the loose threads of his shirt. It slipped between his fingers and whispered secrets he couldn't even hear. He took a slow breath and felt the same breeze move through him. In and out, without effort, a quiet miracle. The breeze didn't belong to him. It didn't belong to the boat or the sea or the sky. It was shared. It was everywhere. It was ancient, a presence that had carried the breath of trees, of mountains, of generations long gone and of loved ones past. And in that moment, he understood. His own breath was part of that same breeze, a numinous thread that bound him to the world, not by force, but by the soft, persistent grace of life itself. He smiled and let the breeze carry him forward, each breath a gentle step in the endless dance of air and being. This is So What, Who Cares? With Laura McCarville and me, Jeff Kolaski. Join us as we explore practical insights for an impractical mind. If you like our show, show us some love on social media or YouTube or I hate this part. This is my least favorite part, is telling people, like, do something for us.
I know, and yet people do want to do something. They just
know.
need direction,
Yeah. If you're listening on Spotify, you can swipe up, and that's a good way to leave a comment. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not know
Swipe
that.
up, and you can leave a comment.
Oh, yay.
We're hosted through Spotify. We're not sponsored. It's just what we host through Spotify. And so you can do that. Or you can send us emails. Nobody ever does that, so you should go send us emails.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. I can't even get Laura to send an email
Sorry.
to mail dot so what who cares
It's the
@gmail.
mail dot. Yeah,
Mail dot.
yeah, it's the mail dot. I keep thinking that's like an accident, so I'll take the mail dot out.
Mail dot.
Yeah.
Because So What, Who Cares
Noted.
and So What, Who Cares podcasts were both taken when I tried to make it.
Ah.
But
So mail dot.
mail dot. How's Laura?
I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm happy to be here.
Me too. Last episode, we talked about breath, but we talked specifically, well, and the episode was titled Breath Backfires, or Backfiring Breath, when breath backfires and blah, 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 blah. Trauma, triggers, all that good stuff, right? That was last episode.
Yeah.
We're going to stay on the topic of breathing.
It's a good one.
But we are going to look at it a little differently this week, correct?
Yeah, I think it would be nice.
Hmm.
It's important to recognize that when you're being taught and cued up to breathing, sometimes that doesn't work.
Hmm.
And there's a reason why we're being cued up to it.
Hmm.
And there's some really beautiful ecological, spiritual practices
So
around this very thing we do
yeah,
easily and naturally.
we're gonna get a little bit weird today.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's weird, but I
I
would.
might.
Okay,
No,
okay.
I'm just asking. What is this something that I might find weird,
Oh, yeah, you might.
mysterious,
Maybe.
magical?
Oh,
It's kind
do
of
you?
fun. I love that.
Yeah, I
So
would say there's mystic in it or can
yeah,
be.
yeah. We haven't really dug into much of that.
Mm-mm.
It's all been very like almost not scientific, but it's had a very like real and grounded. Not to
Yeah.
say that any of what we're going to talk about is not real or grounded, but um, I think it's kind of fun if we're going to get a little.
Yeah, I think it's easy to learn and learn and learn and forget the numinous, forget the
Hmm.
spiritual, forget the esoteric of being here
Hmm.
and embodying this like experience of being alive.
I love it.
Yeah.
You just one of the things that I loved is in some of the notes that you sent me is you described breath as a sacred thread.
Mm.
You want to talk about that? Numinous when it's a resource? What
Yeah.
is
Okay, I'm curious when I said that
uh-huh.
to you, what you thought. Like, what, or were you
Mm.
like, what is, because I can say that, but
Hmm.
I'm curious what you heard or what you thought.
That's a hard question for me to answer because I'm gonna be honest, I had to even look up what numinous meant
Uh huh.
because that's just not something I was familiar with,
Sure.
a descriptor that I was, if that's even a adjective or
Yeah,
whatever
right.
that word is. So sacred thread.
Hmm.
Are we describing breath as being a sacred thread?
Yeah, I think that's how it kind of came out.
Okay, so then to me,
Uh
if I
huh.
were to, for lack of a better term, guess at what you're going for with that, or what that kind of alludes to, is the thing that keeps us here,
Mm.
the thing that it's when I hear thread, I think of something that's attaching to something else, right?
Hmm.
So if I walk away from this chair and the thread of my shirt is stuck on this chair, there's a thread between
Hmm.
myself and the chair.
Mm.
Obviously, if you bring in some sacredness to that, you can, make some metaphorical things between that. But yeah, I guess it would just be something that maybe ties us to the world that we're in.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
in my mind, even as a kid, I remember thinking, earth, the things of the earth let off the thing they breathe in, the things that we breathe out. So there's this like
Yeah.
um what's the word, like synchronicity or something like that.
Dependence.
Yeah, where I need what those plants are breathing out and they need what I'm breathing out, and
Yeah, the
so
genius of it. Yeah.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. am
Yeah,
i
I
am
love
i
it.
am i on the right track there? Okay.
Absolutely. I think the reason I asked is because
Am I pulling the right thread?
you're pulling the right thread. I think why I asked you is because sacred lands on different people
Hmm.
in different ways. So when I
Mm.
say sacred thread, some people might run into where they have resourced that word sacred.
Hmm.
Um, but there's an invitation in all of the stuff that we've shared into the mystic or the numinous or the unknown. Um, and we can get caught up in the science or in the learning in the left brain, and not the creative. So
Hmm.
your experience of sacred is just as valuable and as mine. And um, so when I say breath is a sacred thread, the ecological impact is right there, and there's
Hmm.
science there. But the reality is like we are dependent on nature, and nature depends on us, and it's been created that way. And there's a mystery there. And when we access our breath,
Hmm.
um, not control our breath, I'm not speaking to like breath controls or
Mm.
breath exercising, but when we land in the awareness that here I am breathing, And as I breathe in, I'm breathing out, and the plants and the trees
Mhm.
and nature's breathing with me.
Mm.
And in that moment, with everything going on and the chaos and the stuff, we can just pause and be in that sacred thread, if you
Mm.
will. Okay, so I think not most, maybe we're weird, that we remember
Well, we
that
are.
moment, because in science, I remember the moment, like the teacher drew the little circle and then it
Mhm.
showed, and I remember being like, wait, what?
Like, pause.
Yeah.
We're not that's
Yeah.
like what you mentioned, before, like, why are we not talking about the fact that we used to breathe water, you know?
Yeah.
So, same why aren't
Right.
we talking about this? This
Yeah.
is weird.
Yeah. We're just going to run through this and I have to fill in the diagram, but
Right.
still wait. Um, I think maybe a lot of people have that moment of being like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. Um, there's this other thing that is cool. Again, we're kind of popping over to science, but um, so there's a story of Einstein's son who, when his father was dying,
Fred Stein. I'm just kidding.
I
I
don't
don't
think
know.
I actually don't know his name. Sorry.
Um,
But that he had these like test tubes
hmm,
to save his dad's last breath and then was going to hand out the last breath of his father to his best friends. What we
hmm.
didn't know then is that this thing called argon, which means every breath that's ever been taken still exists. So he didn't need to put this Einstein's breath in a test tube.
You're blowing my mind right now
I know.
because keep going. Keep
Okay.
going.
So that means every breath that's ever been taken is now circling the earth in the form of argon. Now, what's really cool, I think this I'm going to add on.
Mhm.
Um, and when I learned about this, it was also I also read like that means people we love and people we don't. Um, it's all here still.
Mm.
If someone meditates at a tree or sits or plants a garden by a tree, let's say, you could actually go to that tree and find the DNA of that person in their breath that has been left on the tree.
Mm-mm.
I know. So the book is called The Atomic Self. Um, and it was gifted
This
to me
is
by a
this is kind of
genius, but
crazy
um
in a good way.
in a good way. But really it is quite magical to
Mhm.
just sit with that. Now, when we lose someone we love or when someone dies, then there is this mystical understanding too that their breath still is here. And that for
Mm.
people I work with in stuck grief is like when the grief isn't
Sure.
metabolizing, and there's some resourcing there. That's that
Mhm.
numinous, the mystic, where we go, oh, I can be here, and you can do it with a pet too,
Mhm.
right? Like
Right.
here I am breathing in the very breath, and and they're still here. It's still cycling, circling around.
My tendency here, my knee jerk is to start asking scientific questions about it, but I'm
Hmm.
gonna try to not do that
Hmm.
because I want this to remain kind of magical because I don't want to overthink what all that means. And I know there's probably answers there and you probably even know how to answer those things,
Hmm.
but I'm going to pause that. Maybe I'll look it up at some
And
point.
science is magical. I mean, that
Agreed.
is like
Oh
magical
yeah.
because both of the things we're talking about is science.
Agree.
But you're right, we can get really heady in it
Hmm.
instead of doing the thing, which is just noting that
Appreciating
we're
it.
breathing,
Yeah.
and
Right.
when in mindfulness, when we train our breath, or not train, but when we practice awareness of breath, it's kind of like this, like you practice, oh, here I am breathing in, here I am breathing out. And then the mind wanders off to all the stuff. And then we go, come back, like you do, when you're
Hmm.
training a puppy to sit, like, come on. And then it wanders off. That's what happens.
Mm.
And in the beginning, we're not very attentive to the breath, our awareness and eventually we can stay with the breath a little longer, which means we can stay present a
Mhm.
little bit longer, and we can tie eventually, you fall into your body a bit. You
Mhm.
wiggle your toes and I come back to that. And
Mhm.
oh yeah, here I am breathing, and I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. And right here, there's nothing more for me to do than to be in that magical, mystical,
Mhm.
sacred thread of we're all
Yeah.
connected.
So when you talk about, we talked a little bit about just noticing your breathing
Mhm.
and all of that. Do you have, and it since we're kind of going down, we're sitting sort of in a mystical place right now where I'm allowing myself some freedom to be there and to go
Mhm.
there. Do you have any like practice or ritual or anything um, that you find yourself going back to often or time
Mhm.
and time again that sort of keeps you there, keeps you in it, keeps
Yeah.
that you want to discuss?
And we can't be present all the time.
Sure.
But there's a few things where ritual, or even if you want to use the word habits, but ritual is kind of nice,
Hmm.
where you can weave them in through the day. Maybe people could even use the language of like informal mindfulness, right?
Mm.
Mindful moments. And it can be pretty simple in the way of like when I park my car in the garage and I hang up the phone because I'm usually on the phone. Um, then I pause and I notice I'm breathing in and I notice I'm breathing out. And I can be there just for a moment and remember, like, here I am before I walk into my house and meet my family and move into the next thing. Between clients, it's a practice
Mhm.
to sort of clear into the next and to be able to meet the present moment. So I have lots of ways in which I informally weave it in. Um, that can be treated like anything can be treated as ritual,
Mhm.
as sacred,
Right.
as mystic.
Yeah, it's just something that not to belittle it with a just, but
Mm.
it's something that you return to
Mhm.
that has meaning for you. I
Mhm.
mean, that's a ritual, right?
Yeah.
If what in whatever sense that may be.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
And I think we practice it in low, what would be the word? Low risk, low stakes scenarios,
Mm.
right? Like my car's parked in the garage. I'm about to walk into my house
Mhm.
and there's nothing going on. And we practice like that connection and that reminder that I'm here, breathing in with the plants and the trees when I'm on a walk, and they're so grateful and I'm so grateful, and this relationship is so connected, so that when things are higher risk, when there's high stakes, if you will, if there's activation in my nervous system, then I've practiced that through ritual, through repetition, through making it sacred. I can fall back into it and access it quicker or easier. Not even like
Mm.
it's easy, but it's like a muscle that you build
Yeah.
so that you can be with it when things come up that are hard, because the reality is that there's going to be hard times.
Mhm.
And that's just part of this humaning
Mhm.
as well.
Humanness,
Oh,
humanism.
humanism.
So, from our last episode,
Mhm.
we kind of know or we've discussed that breath can sometimes trigger things,
Mhm.
can feel the opposite of gentle or helpful, or like there's a connection there.
Mhm. Mhm.
How has this understanding kind of changed your relationship with breath? Like, how does knowing that, like you've mentioned a few different times through our conversations that it started as one thing for in your experience, and then it was like oh, this isn't the same for everyone.
Yeah.
How has this understanding kind of changed things for you?
So I would say in our last podcast, we talked about how the breath is activating, um, and how I don't lead with teaching breath and meditation mindfulness straight
Hmm.
away. Even in asana, if I'm teaching yoga now or movement, I don't jump into breath straight away. But that doesn't mean that these practices or that we're not to train our nervous system to be with activation,
Mhm.
right? So eventually I do teach to breath. I do teach to um even pranayama exercise, even the exercises of breathing, more than just the awareness of breath, right? So
Mm.
eventually, and so that we can work with our activation, that we can work with some of our discomfort and our tolerances. That doesn't mean if I have impeded airways, right? That's very different. If there's a
Right.
structural reason
Right.
that I'm not able to access nasal breathing, totally different.
Mhm.
And if I'm working and training myself in the nervous system, that window of capacity, of course, there's going to be times that the breath is gonna be a little activating. If it's activating, that doesn't mean it's bad,
Mhm.
right? So we're not looking like, "I just need to be chill all the time." But sometimes I need to stretch the parts of me that are like, "I don't like to
Mm.
do that."
Mhm.
And what we find is that when you do move towards awareness of nasal breathing, awareness of breath, awareness of the mystical qualities and the gentleness, the kindness that comes with breathing, um, the breathing, the actual chemical, physical side of breath and of breathing changes too.
Hmm.
So, meaning if I walk in and someone has some, um, activation because of breathing, and we approach it from like a cat from the side, and eventually we come back to it, and they work with some of that discomfort and start to build some tolerance, then they're the activation, the chemical reaction, the physical ability to reach into that, LSD, that low, slow, deep breathing,
Mhm.
it happens on its own.
Hmm. 'Cause the body wants to do that.
I mean, it is.
Right.
We know that because I'm not working out with anyone who's passed out,
Right.
So I
True.
know they're breathing.
Right. They
As I
continue to
don't
do
take
that.
people who
Yeah.
are not
Right.
breathing.
The work I do is consensual. You have to be breathing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. High
so
bar.
yeah. Is there a time you remember sitting, with your breath?
It's interesting because when there's an acute moment, like something that happens, and it's like, okay, now I feel I can like go to it. I actually, I hope I haven't shared this, but I feel like that I maybe have. But one time I was having this was the first time I was able to do that. I was having a panic attack,
Mm.
and I was able to narrate it while
Huh.
having it and cue myself into breathing. It was so fascinating. I was like, "Oh, this is my body
Mm.
response and I'm having a panic attack and I'm going to slow breathe." And I was just talking out loud, and I'm going to breathe out. I'm just breathing out now. And this is what's happening and this will change. Panic attacks won't last forever. And I was able to like cue myself in and to be with the breath and my awareness of slowing it down. That was a very unique moment.
How does that affect that panic attack? I mean, in your experience?
I mean, I haven't had many in that moment.
Yeah.
I was more like, what is happening? I had lots of observer of the observer,
Sure,
right? So I
yeah.
imagine for me it felt like the experience lessened quicker because I
Mhm.
wasn't fighting what was happening. Um, but I don't know.
Sure. Okay.
But I would say like even it's not unusual if like I wake up and from something like a bad dream and I go right into like
Mhm.
be here now, I'm breathing in and I'm right here. I'm breathing out, I'm right here. Whew, you know.
Mhm. I just have some curiosity about that type of, observation of your own breath during that heightened state and what that can or has, not necessarily just for you or but for anybody, and obviously everyone's gonna be a little different depending on what their own tools, their own body, their own situation is.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the the taught or the preferred or one of the go-to tools for if someone's dealing with that? Can it
I
be?
wouldn't teach. I would say if they're able to, like, I couldn't do that 10 years ago.
Okay.
Right. So it's because of my informal practice and then also my formal meditation
Mhm.
practice of being with my breath, my training of breath, that in that moment I could access it.
Okay.
But if you haven't practiced or haven't strengthened that muscle, now I would say wiggle your toes,
Mhm.
you know, more than breathe in, take a deep breath, right? So
Mhm.
I wouldn't cue that because sometimes the awareness of breath, if you haven't been practicing it, actually causes the panic or anxiety and the thing to
Right.
escalate. So if you can access it, because I've been practicing for so many years,
Right.
then it fell in.
Mm.
Um,
Because the people that I've talked to, I have maybe had one panic, not maybe, I've had one.
mhm,
Um, I don't even remember what my breath was doing during it, so it's not something that I can speak to personally. But the people that I've talked to that I know either unfortunately frequent
mhm,
that, breath is the scariest part. Breath is the part that oftentimes actually triggers it because that's what, I'm not able to
right.
breathe.
Right. I mean, this is why people with asthma have anxiety so
Right.
easily. Is it anxiety or is it a breathing disorder?
Mm.
It's, I know. So, same with like little kiddos, like, and
Yeah.
then we're coaching them around their anxiety when they need to
Mhm.
probably maybe see a pulmonologist or,
Right.
I am, that's why I pull back from engaging in this.
Right.
And again, if you're training your breath outside of the panic attack, that's very different. I had been training my breathing, been practicing awareness of breath, and really it's that observer. So what I
Mhm.
had in that moment wasn't like, this is, I'm having a panic attack and I'm supposed to be out of the door, and that, and I wasn't like
Mhm.
in it. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I was doing the thing that in meditation or in mindfulness, informal and formal practices, I had practiced doing, which was compassion, a little
Mhm.
bit of kindness, a little bit of, oh, this is happening now.
Right.
Here I
Mm.
am. So being able to stay present with what was happening. Does that make sense?
Does.
A little bit
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You shared the prompt with me. If your breath could speak,
Mm-hmm.
what would it say to you today? So I love that.
Mm-hmm.
I even just the weirdness, and I use that term,
Yeah.
lovingly. I don't.
Yeah. Like groovy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There you go. We're getting a little hippie with it today, but that's all right. Um, it makes me wonder, I guess, if you've ever felt breath as something beyond yourself. So like a
Mhm.
spirit or a presence.
Mm.
So we're getting weird again. We're getting into the numinous part. So how
Mhm.
would you answer the question? First of all, what would your breath say to you?
Mm. I purposely did not I had the question, but I did
Hmm.
not prepare the answer because the thing of that question is today.
Hmm.
And I'm even going to say if my breath could speak and I had something to say right now, if it had something to say right now, what would it say? You know?
So what are you tapping into to try to listen to that?
Mm.
Is that something you can answer or no?
Yeah, I would say it's this same sort of thing of falling back. Like if I could describe it as a sort of falling back, sitting back from the breath and just listening to that. And someone might say, well, that's your spirit, depending on
Hmm.
culture and religion, you know, text, holy scripture, whatever you turn to,
Hmm.
everyone might have a different word to use. Um,
Essence.
yeah, it might be your essence, right? And at the same time, sometimes the breath feels even different than the essence. It does
Hmm.
have more of a spiritual, um,
Hmm. It almost feels, to me, it almost feels more real to me than when we've talked about essence or we've talked about the spirit or those things, because even though, if you get too scientific, yeah, you can see my breath because you can see the bacteria in it or the argon that's coming out of it, or, in a microscopic level, there'd be something you can see. But from the eyes that we were given with our birth, even with these corrective lenses, I can't see my breath unless it's cold enough. But it's there. There's no question that it's there because I can feel it. I can sense it in other ways, both coming in and going out. So it's very real. And, the question, when you sent me that question, are you thinking, can we actually articulate this? Or is it just to be aware of what is your breath telling you?
Gosh,
Through the way that it's behaving.
I don't typically use God language very often, but some of the words you describe the breath as, I think some people also describe God as, like, can't see it, but it's there, always with you, right? Like, you used a lot of interesting language that when you were describing it, I thought, huh, that's a curious thing. So I don't know the answer. But I think if I sat with like, what would my breath have to say? There would be a more than the essence of me. It would come from something more connected to it all. Um, and it might have something to say today, right now. And it might be different than it was this morning,
It would make sense that it is different because I'm not just going to repeat the same thing all day, every day either.
Right, and
I've
would
got
that be
different
your,
things.
left brain
Right.
doing that? So I think what is more curious, or what's more exciting about the question, is the practice of listening. Right? As we are on the podcast talking and talking and talking,
Right.
right, there's this thing called like deep
Listen, yeah.
listening,
Are you deep
awareness.
listening to us right now?
If so, hit like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now that we got you, a word from our sponsors. We don't have sponsors. That's
No, we
funny.
don't.
No, thanks for that. This all makes it sound to me like breath has its own life in some ways, but breath is also a life sustainer in a lot of ways. We can't breathe we can't live without breath.
I mean, you can live without brain activity, right?
But
If the
if
but
there's something controlling your breath,
if
right?
you can't breathe, if, then
Right. There is instances, just to reiterate what you're saying, there is instances of brain activity not being there, but there's still life in that body because whether it's natural or whether it's a machine doing it for you, there's breath going. Is that kind of what you
Well, I'm
mean?
saying if there's no machine and there's still breath, you're s- you would the body's still alive. That's an interesting thing, isn't it? Or if there's a machine keeping the body alive, pumping the breath, and you turn the machine off, the body
It's
would
done.
done. Yeah, done,
Yeah.
dead, right? So it does sustain life.
So it sustains life, doesn't necessarily give life. It sustains it.
Tell me what you mean.
Well, I'm just going down the roads that my brain's taking me to right now. And so we can't live without breath. Breath is life in a lot of ways, but it doesn't necessarily create life unless you want to get super.
I mean, CPR. I mean, right? Like we do
Yeah.
exchange breath, kissing.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be pretty life giving.
So do we breathe a breath or does a breath breathe us?
Yeah, I love that. Isn't that cool? Again, it's like learning that thing of like letting the breath breathe you. the awareness is like that falling back
Mm-hmm.
and just letting the breath breathe you
Mm-hmm.
in and out. Um, and then the mind will do its thing and the body will be like over here, ow.
Right.
And then,
This
and then you
hurts.
go, okay, yeah, and here I am still being breathed by this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Something really profound and kind of beautiful about considering breath is something so, what'd you call it last week? Not automatic, but
Mm-hmm.
automatic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And simple, and at the same time being something so powerful and important, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned, God,
Mm-hmm.
and in a lot of what the spiritual texts or religious texts, I should say, and whatnot, and how that's been interpreted, has a lot of the same terminology. And as after you've mentioned that, now I'm noticing it even more, you know, and essentially an all powerful thing. Without some form of breath, nothing here exists. But it's also a really simple thing. It's just in and out. It's just this
And you don't
automatic
even have
thing.
to remind your
No.
body to do it. It does it
Yeah.
for you, just like the heart beats without you telling it to do that.
Right.
Well, I think if we could just take a moment and practice that easily, and maybe when I said it, people did drop, you do just by listening,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of bring yourself to that awareness. Um, but it can be super simple and not overcomplicate it. I think what happens when we cue up breathing and awareness of breath, we automatically go to like, I should be doing it different. I should be doing it better. Am I breathing enough? I can't feel it here. And none of that is what we're doing here. That's not important,
Mm-hmm.
right? But could instead, and some people will just use breath to beat themselves up just like anything else, right? So more importantly, when we bring ourselves to the awareness of breath, I think is the thing of like with some kindness,
Mm-hmm.
um, or even a little bit of curiosity, falling back. So it would be like, I'll close my eyes, but of course you don't have to. Um, and just notice wherever you sense your breath, if that's at the nose or throat or the chest. And maybe it's so subtle that you're not even sensing it, per se, but then you would imagine it. As you breathe in, it enters through the nose. And as you breathe out, you breathe out through the nose. And you might feel temperature, like it's cool as it comes in and the body warms it. And you breathe out. And it's that simple, this falling back. Here I am breathing. And just as I am, just as this is, it's enough. And that's it. Now, sometimes, if I were to add on to the spiritual piece, sometimes it is something to think of a tree you climbed on as a little kid, or a pet that you loved, or a friend that's no longer with us, and you want to kind of cycle that argon, in your mind and feel that they're breathing too. Or if it's, a place you love to be in nature, and you imagine that you're sharing that breath. There's something there too if you wanted to just for a moment, here I am breathing with them. Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
It's cool.
Groovy.
Groovy. The traveler's eyes closed as the breeze caused the tiny hairs on his skin to dance, and he felt every breath move in time with it. It was as if the wind itself was whispering, a reminder that every breath is both ancient and new, a living thread that ties him to the earth, the water, and the quiet sky. He didn't need to see where the horizon met the sea. He knew that with every breath, he was part of something bigger, something that reached back through time and forward into possibility. He let the breeze guide him, trusting that the world itself was singing through his lungs. And in that gentle song, he felt the promise of each moment, a breath, a chance, a way to begin again.